She follows to the goal of those that are passing on beyond. She is the first in the eternal succession of the dawns that are coming. Usha widens, bringing out that which lives, awakening someone who was dead. What is her scope? When she harmonizes with the dawns that shone out before and those that now must shine. She desires the ancient mornings and fulfills their light. Projecting forwards her illumination, she enters into communion with the rest that are to come. She follows to the goal of those that are passing on beyond. She is the first in the eternal succession of the dawns that are coming. Usha widens, bringing out that which lives, awakening someone who was dead. What is her scope when she harmonizes with the dawns that shone out before and those that now must shine? She desires the ancient mornings and fulfills their light. Projecting forwards her illumination, she enters into communion with the rest that are to come. Kutsa Angirasa Rigveda. Threefold are those supreme births of this divine force that is in the world. They are true, they are desirable. He moves, there wide overt within the infinite and shines pure, luminous and fulfilling. That which is immortal in immortals and possessed of the truth is a God and established inwardly as an energy working out in our divine powers. Become high uplifted, O strength, pierce all veils, manifest in us the things of the Godhead. Threefold are those supreme births of this divine force that is in the world. They are true, they are desirable. He moves there wide overt within the infinite and shines pure, luminous and fulfilling. That which is immortal, immortals and possessed of the truth, is a God and established inwardly as an energy, working out in our divine powers. Become high, uplifted, O strength, pierce all veils, manifest in us the things of the Godhead. Vamadeva Rigveda. The earliest preoccupation of man in his awakened thoughts, and, as it seems, his inevitable and ultimate preoccupation, for it survives the longest periods of skepticism and returns after every banishment, is also the highest which his thoughts can envisage. It manifests itself in the divination of Godhead, the impulse towards perfection, the search after pure truth and unmixed bliss, the sense of a secret immortality. The ancient dawns of human knowledge have left us their witness to this constant aspiration. Today we see a humanity satiated but not satisfied by a victorious analysis of the externalities of nature, preparing to return to its primeval longings. The earliest formula of wisdom promises to be its last: God, light, freedom, immortality. These persistent ideals of the race are at once the contradiction of its normal experience and the affirmation of higher and deeper experiences, which are abnormal to humanity and only to be attained in their organized entirety by a revolutionary individual effort or an evolutionary general progression. To know, possess, and to be the divine being in an animal and egoistic consciousness, to convert our toilet or obscure physical mentality into the plenary supramental illumination, to build peace. To convert our twilight or obscure physical mentality into the plenary supramental illumination to build peace and a self-existent bliss where there is only a stress of transitory satisfactions besieged by physical pain and emotional suffering, to establish an infinite freedom in a world which presents itself as a group of mechanical necessities, to discover and realize the immortal life in a body subjected to death and constant mutation. This is offered to us as the manifestation of God in matter, and the goal of nature in her terrestrial evolution. To the ordinary material intellect, which takes its present organization of consciousness for the limit of its possibilities, the direct contradiction of the unrealized ideals with the realized fact is a final argument against their validity. But if we take a more deliberate view of the world's workings, that direct opposition appears rather as a part of nature's profoundest method and the seal of her completest sanction. For all problems of existence are essentially problems of harmony. They arise from the perception of an unsolved discord and the instinct of an undiscovered agreement or unity. To rest content with an unsolved discord is possible for the practical and more animal part of man, but impossible for his fully awakened mind, and usually even his practical parts only escape from the general necessity, either by shutting out the problem or by accepting a rough, utilitarian, and unillumined compromise. For essentially, all nature seeks a harmony, life, and matter in their own sphere as much as mind in the arrangement of its perceptions. The greater the apparent disorder of the materials offered, or the apparent disparateness, the greater the apparent disorder of the materials offered, or the apparent disparateness, even to irreconcilable opposition of the elements that have to be utilized, the stronger is the spur, and it drives towards a more subtle and puissant order that can normally be the result of a less difficult endeavor. The accordance of active life with a material of form in which the condition of activity itself seems to be inertia is one problem of opposites that nature has solved and seeks always to solve better with greater complexities, for its perfect solution would be the material immortality of a fully organized mind supporting animal body. The accordance of conscious mind and conscious will with a form and a life in themselves, not overtly self-conscious and capable at best of a mechanical or subconscious will, is another problem of opposites, in which she has produced astonishing results and aims always at higher marvels, for there her ultimate miracle would be an animal consciousness no longer seeking but possessed of truth and light, with the practical omnipotence which would result from the possession of a direct and perfected knowledge. Not only, then, is the upward impulse of man towards the accordance of yet higher opposites rational in itself, but it is the only logical completion of our rule and an effort that seems to be a fundamental method of nature and the very sense of her universal strivings. We speak of the evolution of life in matter, the evolution of mind in matter, but evolution is a word which merely states the phenomenon without explaining it. For there seems to be no reason why life should evolve out of material elements or mind out of living form, unless we accept the Vedantic solution that life is already involved in matter and mind in life, because in essence matter is a form of veiled life, life a form of veiled consciousness. And then there seems to be little objection to a farther step in the series and the admission that mental consciousness may itself be only a form and a veil of higher states which are beyond mind. In that case, the unconquerable impulse of man towards God, light, bliss, freedom, immortality presents itself in its right place in the chain as simply the imperative impulse by which nature is seeking to evolve beyond mind, and appears to be as natural, true, and just as the impulse towards life, which she has planted in forms of matter, or the impulse towards mind, which she has planted in certain forms of life. As there, so here, the impulse exists more or less obscurely in her different vessels, with an ever ascending series in the power of its will to be.
You'll need to unlock your iPhone first.
As there, so here, the impulse exists more or less obscurely in her different vessels, with an ever-ascending series in the power of its will to be. As there, so here, it is gradually evolving and bound fully to evolve the necessary organs and faculties. As the impulse towards mind ranges from the more sensitive reactions of life, in the metal and the plant, up to its full organization in man, so in man himself there is the same ascending series, the preparation, if nothing more, of a higher and divine life. The animal is a living laboratory in which nature has, it is said, worked out man. Man himself may well be a thinking and living laboratory in whom and with whose conscious operation she wills to work out the Superman, the God. Or shall we not say rather to manifest God? For if evolution is the progressive manifestation by nature of that which slept or worked in her, involved, it is also the overt realization of that which she secretly is. We cannot, then, bid her pause at a given stage of her evolution, nor have we the right to condemn with the religionist as perverse and presumptuous, or with the rationalist as a disease or hallucination, any intention she may evince or effort she may make to go beyond. If it be true that spirit is involved in matter and apparent nature is secret God, then the manifestation of the divine in himself and the realization of God within and without are the highest and most legitimate aim possible to man upon earth. Thus, the eternal paradox and eternal truth of a divine life in an animal body, an immortal aspiration or reality inhabiting a mortal tenement, a single and universal consciousness representing itself in limited minds and divided egos, a transcended, indefinable, timeless, and spaceless being, who alone renders time and space and cosmos possible, and in all these, the higher truth realizable by the lower term, justify themselves to the deliberate reason as well as to the persistent instinct or intuition of mankind. Attempts are sometimes made to have done finally with questionings, which have so often been declared insoluble by logical thought, and to persuade men to limit their mental activities to the practical and immediate problems of their material existence in the universe. But such evasions are never permanent in their effect. Mankind returns from them with a more vehement impulse of inquiry or a more violent hunger for an immediate solution. By that hunger, mysticism profits and new religions arise to replace the old that have been destroyed or stripped of significance by a skepticism which itself could not satisfy, because although its business was inquiry, it was unwilling sufficiently to inquire. The attempt to deny or stifle a truth because it is yet obscure in its outward workings and too often represented by obscurantist superstition or a crude faith is itself a kind of obscurantism. The will to escape from a cosmic necessity because it is arduous, difficult to justify by immediate tangible results, slow in regulating its operations, must turn out eventually to have been no acceptance of the truth of nature, but a revolt against the secret, mightier will of the great Mother. It is better and more rational to accept what she will not allow us as a race to reject, and lift it from the sphere of blind instinct, obscure intuition, and random aspiration into the light of reason and an instructed and consciously self-guiding will. And if there is any higher light of illumined intuition or self-revealing truth which is now in man either obstructed and inoperative, or works with intermittent glancings as if from behind a veil, or with occasional displays as of the northern lights in our material skies, then there also we need not fear to aspire. For it is likely that such is the next higher state of consciousness, of which mind is only a form and veil, and through the splendors of that light may lie the path of our progressive self-enlargement into whatever highest state is humanity's ultimate resting place. energized conscious force in the austerity of thought, and came to the knowledge that matter is the Brahman. For from matter all existences are born. Born by matter, they increase and enter into matter in their passing hence. Then he went to Varuna, his father, and said, Lord, teach me of the Brahman. But he said to him, energize again the conscious energy in thee, for the energy is Brahman. He energized conscious force in the austerity of thought, and came to the knowledge that matter is the Brahman. For from matter all existences are born. Born by matter, they increase and enter into matter in their passing hence. Then he went to Varuna, his father, and said, Lord, teach me of the Brahman. But he said to him, energize again the conscious energy in thee, for the energy is Brahman. Taittiriya Upanishad. The affirmation of a divine life upon earth and an immortal sense in mortal existence can have no base unless we recognize not only eternal spirit as the inhabitant of this bodily mansion, the wearer of this mutable robe, but accept matter of which it is made as a fit and noble material out of which he weaves constantly his garbs, builds recurrently the unending series of his mansions. Nor is this even enough to guard us against a recoil from life in the body unless with the Upanishads, perceiving behind their appearances the identity and essence of these two extreme terms of existence, we are able to say in the very language of those ancient writings, matter also is Brahman, and to give its Nor is this even enough to guard us against a recoil from life in the body unless, with the Upanishads, perceiving behind their appearances the identity and essence of these two extreme terms of existence, we are able to say in the very language of those ancient writings, matter is... Nor is this even enough to guard us against a recoil from life in the body unless, with the Upanishads, perceiving behind their appearances the identity and essence of these two extreme terms of existence, we are able to say in the very language of those ancient writings, matter also is Brahman, and to give its full value to the vigorous figure by which the physical universe is described as the external body of the divine being. Nor, so far divided apparently, are these two extreme terms. In that identification convincing to the rational intellect, if we refuse to recognize a series of ascending terms, life, mind, supermind, and the grades that link mind to supermind between spirit and matter. Otherwise, the two must appear as irreconcilable opponents, bound together in an unhappy wedlock, and their divorce the one reasonable solution. To identify them, to represent each in the terms of the other, becomes an artificial creation of thought, opposed to the logic of facts, and possible only by an irrational mysticism. If we assert only pure spirit and a mechanical unintelligent substance or energy, unintelligent substance or energy, calling one God or soul and the other nature, the inevitable end will be that we shall either deny God or else turn from nature. For both thought and life, a choice then becomes imperative. Thought comes to deny the one as an illusion of the imagination, or the other as an illusion of the senses. Life comes to fix on the immaterial and flee from itself in a disgust or a self-forgetting ecstasy, or else to deny its own immortality and take its orientation away from God and towards the animal Purusha and Prakriti. The passively luminous soul of the Sankhyas and their mechanically active energy have nothing in common, not even their opposite modes of inertia. Their antinomies can only be resolved by the cessation of the inertly driven activity into the immutable repose upon which it has been casting in vain the sterile procession of its images. Shankara's wordless, inactive self and his Maya of many names and forms are equally disparate and irreconcilable entities. Their rigid antagonism can terminate only by the dissolution of the multitudinous illusion into the sole truth of an eternal silence. The materialist has an easier field. It is possible for him, by denying spirit, to arrive at a more readily convincing simplicity of statement, a real monism, the monism of matter, or else of force. But in this rigidity of statement, it is impossible for him to persist permanently. He too ends by positing an unknowable, as inert, as remote from the known universe as the passive Purusha or the silent Atman. It serves no purpose but to put off by a vague concession the inexorable demands of thought, or to stand as an excuse for refusing to extend the limits of inquiry. Therefore, in these barren contradictions, the human mind cannot rest satisfied. It must seek always a complete affirmation. It can find it only by a luminous reconciliation. To reach that reconciliation, it must traverse the degrees which our inner consciousness imposes on us, and, whether by objective method or of analysis applied to life and mind as to matter, or by subjective synthesis and illumination, arrive at the repose of the ultimate unity without denying the energy of the expressive multiplicity. Only in such a complete and Catholic affirmation can all the multiform and apparently contradictory data of existence be harmonized, and the manifold conflicting forces which govern our thought and life discover the central truth which they are here to symbolize and variously fulfill. Then only can our thought, having attained a true center, ceasing to wander in circles, work like the Brahman of the Upanishad, fixed and stable, even in its play and its worldwide cursing, and our life, knowing its aim, serve it with a serene and settled joy, and light as well as with a rhythmically discursive energy. But when that rhythm has once been disturbed, it is necessary and helpful that man should test separately in their extreme assertion each of the two great opposites. It is the mind's natural way of returning more perfectly to the affirmation it has lost. On the road it may attempt to rest in the intervening degrees, reducing all things into the terms of an original life energy, or of sensation, or of ideas. But these exclusive solutions have always an air of unreality. They may satisfy for a time the logical reason which deals only with pure ideas, but they cannot satisfy the mind's sense of actuality. For the mind knows that there is something behind itself which is not the idea. It knows, on the other hand, that there is something within itself which is more than the vital breath. Either spirit or matter can give it for a time some sense of ultimate reality. Not so any of the principles that intervene. It must, therefore, go to the two extremes before it can return fruitfully upon the whole. For, by its very nature, served by a sense that can perceive with distinctness only the parts of existence, and by a speech that also can achieve distinctness only when it carefully divides and limits, the intellect is driven, having before it this multiplicity of elemental principles, to seek unity by reducing all ruthlessly to the terms of one. It attempts practically, in order to assert this one, to get rid of the others, to perceive the real source of their identity. Without this exclusive process, it must either have overleaped itself or must have completed the circuit, only to find that all equally reduce themselves to that which escapes definition or description, and is yet not only real, but attainable. By whatever road we may travel, that is always the end at which we arrive, and we can only escape it by refusing to complete the journey. It is therefore of good augury that after many experiments and verbal solutions we should now find ourselves standing today in the presence of the two that have alone borne for long the most rigorous tests of experience, the two extremes, and that at the end of the experience both should have come to a result which the universal instinct in mankind, that veiled judge, sentinel and representative of the universal spirit of truth, refuses to accept as right or as satisfying. In Europe and in India, respectively, the negation of the materialist and the refusal of the ascetic to have sought to assert themselves as the sole truth and to dominate the conceptions of life. In India, if the result has been a great heaping up of the treasures of the spirit, or of some of them, it has also been a great bankruptcy of life. Bankruptcy of life. Bankruptcy of life. In Europe, the fullness of riches and the triumphant mastery of the world's powers and possessions have progressed towards an equal bankruptcy in the things of the spirit. Nor has the intellect, which sought the solution of all problems in the one term of matter, found satisfaction in the answer that it has received. Therefore, the time grows ripe, and the tendency of the world moves towards a new and comprehensive affirmation in thought and in inner and outer experience, and to its corollary, a new and rich self-fulfillment in an integral human existence for the individual and for the race. From the difference in the relations of spirit and matter to the unknowable, which they both represent, there arises also a difference of effectiveness in the material and the spiritual negations. The denial of the materialist, although more insistent and immediately successful, more facile in its appeal to the generality of mankind, is yet less enduring, less effective, finally, than the absorbing and perilous refusal of the ascetic, for it carries within itself its own cure. Its most powerful element is the agnosticism which, admitting the unknowable behind all manifestation, extends the limits of the unknowable until it comprehends all that is merely unknown. Its premise is that the physical senses are our sole means of knowledge, and that reason, therefore, even in its most extended and vigorous flights, cannot escape beyond their domain. It must deal always and solely with the facts which they provide or suggest, and the suggestions themselves must always be kept tied to their origins. We cannot go beyond. We cannot use them as a bridge leading us into a domain where more powerful and less limited faculties come into play, and another kind of inquiry has to be instituted. A premise so arbitrary pronounces on itself its own sentence of insufficiency. It can only be maintained by ignoring or explaining away all that vast field of evidence and experience which contradicts it, denying or disparaging noble and useful faculties, active, consciously or obscurely, or at worst, latent in all human beings, and refusing to investigate supraphysical phenomena except as manifested in relation to matter and its movements and conceived as a subordinate activity of material forces. As soon as we begin to investigate the operations of mind and of supramind in themselves, and without the prejudgment that is determined from the beginning to see in them only a subordinate term of matter, we come into contact with a mass of phenomena which escape entirely from the rigid hold, the limiting dogmatism of the materialist formula. And the moment we recognize, as our enlarging experience compels us to recognize, that there are in the universe knowable realities beyond the range of the senses, and in man powers and faculties which determine rather than are determined by the material organs through which they hold themselves in touch with the world of the senses, that outer shell of our true and complete existence, the premise of materialistic agnosticism disappears. We are ready for a large statement and an ever-developing inquiry. But first, it is well that we should recognize the enormous, the indispensable utility of the very brief period of rationalistic materialism through which humanity has been passing. For that vast field of evidence, and which And experience, which now begins to reopen its gates to us, can only be safely entered with the intellect when the intellect has been severely trained to a clear austerity. Seized on by unripe minds, it lends itself to the most perilous distortions and misleading imaginations, and actually in the past encrusted a real nucleus of truth with such an accretion of perverting superstitions and irrationalizing dogmas that all advance in true knowledge was rendered impossible. It became necessary for a time to make a clean sweep at once of the truth and its disguise in order that the road might be clear for a new departure and a sure advance. The rationalistic tendency of materialism has done mankind this great service. For the faculties that transcend the senses by the very fact of their being enmeshed in matter, mission to work in a physical body, put in harness to draw one car along with the emotional desires and nervous impulses, are exposed to a mixed functioning in which they are in danger of illuminating confusion rather than clarifying truth. Especially is this mixed functioning dangerous when men with unchastened minds and purified sensibilities attempt to rise into the higher domains of spiritual experience. In what regions of unsubstantial cloud and semi-brilliant fog, or a murk visited by flashes which blind more than they enlighten, do they not lose themselves by that rash and premature adventure? An adventure necessary indeed in the way in which nature chooses to effect her advance, for she amuses herself as she works, but still, for the reason, rash and premature. It is necessary, therefore, that advancing knowledge should base herself on a clear, pure, and disciplined intellect. It is necessary, too, that she should correct her error sometimes by a return to the restraint of sensible fact, the concrete realities of the physical world. The touch of earth is always reinvigorating to the son of earth, even when he seeks a superphysical knowledge. It may even be said that the superphysical can only be really mastered in its fullness to its heights we can always reach when we keep our feet firmly on the physical. Earth is his footing, says the Upanishad, whenever it images the self that manifests in the universe. And it is certainly the fact that the wider we extend and the surer we make our knowledge of the physical world, the wider and surer becomes our foundation for the higher knowledge, even for the highest, even for the Brahma Vidya